Hey, welcome everyone. This is a meeting of the West Palm Beach City Commission and Commission work session. It is Tuesday, September 4th, and it's 4:04 p.m. We're going to start with item number 1, City Place Architecture. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. Rick Green, Development Services Director. The first two items are ours, and we'll just take a few minutes. We won't be very long, but the first thing we wanted to talk about is City Place Architecture.
Channel 18, we have a fuzzy screen. Is yours fuzzy too? Much better, thank you.
As you know, we've been working with them on modifications to the City Place plan development, so I'll have Eric come up and talk a little bit about some of the discussions we've had, and we're going to seek a little bit of direction from the Commission if we could. Then secondly, when Eric's done, I'll come back and talk a little bit about an issue regarding docks. So at this point, let me turn it over to Eric Schneider, our Principal Planner.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Commission. As Rick said, this is about City Place. And at the beginning of the year, y'all approved the City Place Core Development Regulations, and that was kind of taking the design guidelines that were in place from when City Place was the lease agreement and putting it into zoning context for when a City Place ultimately enacts their purchase agreement for the land that you see outlined in red, subject to not the crosshatched area, which is the plaza, from the CRA. So within that carryover, as you're aware, City Place was originally designed, and it still is, a Mediterranean, and the requirements are that it's a Mediterranean design. So, and here are the specific provisions from the development regulations that discuss it. The top one talks about City Place has to be based on historical Mediterranean style, and these are excerpts from the just dealing with this. So, and then it talks about the Mediterranean vocabulary for materials, etc. So City Place has turned in an application primarily for the redevelopment of the Macy's site, but within that they're also asking to strike all of the Mediterranean references for the area that I showed you in red on the previous slide, so the entire City Place core. So what staff wanted to do before we started moving forward with that application with this specific provisions was to get a feel from the City Commission how you felt about City Place remaining as a Mediterranean design or opening that up to then however City Place wanted to come forward. Now, there's two parts to this. There's one is the existing buildings, which here is looking at the plaza, looking towards the east, across the plaza. All of you are familiar with this view. So this is a Spanish Mediterranean architecture. And here's, the top is City Place did a rendering of it in the existing, and then the bottom one is what they could potentially do if the Mediterranean was taken out. Now you see, the main thing you'll notice right away is the colors that would open them up to having a big, wider color scheme in the buildings. The second one, just some examples here, and this is not all-inclusive, and I just put there. If you note here, I've kind of highlighted two areas of the same area. One has the arches there on the top one on the existing. That's a traditional Mediterranean type architectural style, and you notice it's not everywhere in City Place, but this would then allow City Place to come through and change the facades, not have to do the arches, some of the columns that you see in there, some of the other elements that are traditional Mediterranean, the barrel tile roofs, they wouldn't need to refine those, they could replace out the facades. Now, if they were to come in and do, if you approve getting rid of the Mediterranean and they wanted to come in and do the design on the potential facade on the bottom screen, that is staff level approval. We would look at it. It would not come before the City Commission. We would look at it internally, then we'd go to building permit if, so that they could, and then they would be able to do the changeouts. The other side of the coin is on new development sites, such as the redevelopment of the Macy's site, or if they put, redevelop on top of the garages, etc. So what we have now, some of our bigger buildings that are Mediterranean design, here you see the South Tower on the left, and you see the, one of the original City Place condos there on the right. Those are Mediterranean designs, meet the architectural standards. So City Place would, on the Macy's site, doesn't want to have to design a building that looks like either one of these. They would like to have more freedom in their design. And so City Place did provide some images of what could potentially go, some other things. This is where we would like to get some input from the commission. If the Mediterranean requirement is removed, and I'm not saying City Place is coming in with any of these designs. They have not come in and shown us any design for Macy's. But these are some things that could happen or could be done if you take the Mediterranean off. One of the other things that we are doing and we've discussed with City Place is that they will be bringing in, or we will be bringing forward to you guys on this amendment, is to putting in some of the architectural feature, such as the planar breaks and some of the other architectural requirements that the DMP has. And that's really what City Place would like to go, is more of what the rest of DMP has, other than City Place being held to Mediterranean. So while you only see one building, the hotel in the middle and the bottom, that is actually from West Palm Beach, you know what some of the other buildings we've had come out of the ground look like, as an idea of what meets the code. Now, if you're comfortable with
Eric, I have a quick question.
Oh, yes.
The office building that they're proposing at Fern and Rosemary.
Correct.
Is that part of the DRI?
No, that is actually outside of the boundaries of
Okay.
City Place, while
Okay.
City Place
So
partners
that
does own
doesn't
it.
have to comply with.
So it does not. But if you imagine what that building's looking like, if that meets the downtown master plan requirements, that building could come in then and be built. I don't know. We haven't done the analysis to see if it meets Mediterranean. It probably does not. But it does meet some of the other design regulations that are going forth as part of
From
this
the rest
amendment,
of downtown.
regardless of whether it says strictly Mediterranean or not Mediterranean. So, Commissioner Ryan, I see your hand coming up there.
Commissioner Ryan?
So you showed us what might look like to repurpose what's already there.
Yes.
And these are not anywhere near what it might be, but just ideas that it could be if on the Macy's site,
Yes.
because that's going to be a new development. So are they going to tear down everything to the bowling alley and beyond?
Correct. The plan right now, and you will be seeing this in the next month and a half, 2 months, because the application is in process, not for the specific building. They'll be coming back with that, but for the framework of the regulations. And that's really why we're here with how it's going to look. They'll be tearing down the Macy's building. The building with the bowling alley and the offices above will remain. And then they would redevelop the block that the Macy's currently sits on between the alley that you drive to go to the Macy's parking garage, which is no longer the Macy's garage, but it'll be the garage for the building.
So to the west.
Yes. So right now it looks like the discussions we've had with City Place is 4 to 5 stories of retail and office as a base, and then a tower above, up to 21 stories above that. So that's why some of these, are appropriate to say, is it going to look like the towers that you see, here? Oops, why is this not working? Oh, there we go. Is it going to look? Are you going to say that you want it to look like these towers here, or do they have the freedom to open up and put some of these in? Now, the one key with this is you will see any building that comes forward as a level 3 site plan.
That was our next question.
The issue that we want to know is well, here it is. It's going to be a level 3. Do you want them to continue to go as a Mediterranean, because that's then going to drive their design of the new Macy's building? Or if not, are there any architectural styles you don't want? And some City Place representatives are here because what we don't want to see is go down a route that you either do or do not want to see, and have a lot of time and energy spent that when it gets to you guys, you say no. So if you have some direction, and you may say, whatever they want to come back with, we'll review at that time. You may say, we want Mediterranean. That we're not asking you to say, choose one style or another. That's what we're really here for, to find out what your desires are. The one thing that staff would recommend is that the Himmel Theater, the historic church that's in the middle of the plaza, does remain Mediterranean in any event. If you say nothing else has to be Mediterranean in the plaza, the church does at least.
Yeah.
So,
I have to tell you, I was there yesterday in the torrential downpour that happened, and I was very happy to be under the walkways, and, I see some benefit to having covered areas, whether they're Mediterranean or not Mediterranean. I have to say I was happy that there were covered areas at City Place when the skies opened up. So, Commissioner Lambert, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I had a question about these prescriptive requirements, and do we have them in other places in our city? And maybe you could talk to the history of why they were placed on City Place when City Place was created.
Okay, my understanding, and I wasn't here when City Place was created, but my understanding was it kind of based on a lot of what the church, the historic church was Mediterranean, and a lot of the architecture that we had seen, the styles were Mediterranean based. I mean, you can even see that there was, going to Boca with Meisner and other projects that have come in. So that's really why in the RFP that they went out, it came back as a Mediterranean. So they drew up the design guidelines to be Mediterranean. Over time, I showed you the South Tower building. Some Mediterranean, I've been told, doesn't really work for very tall buildings. So that's one of the reasons why City Place doesn't really want to go with the Mediterranean on the
And I think
new
there's
Macy's.
also a change in philosophy.
Yeah.
They've been working with Gale Studios as well as we have, and one of the things that Gopal has said, and I think it's really important, he said, we don't want to be City Place anymore, we want to be a place in the city. And right now it stands out as a separate place. All of the buildings are turned inward. It's very sort of like an island in the middle of the downtown. And I know what the people at Gala are recommending is opening it up and making it part of the city. And I think that that's a laudatory goal.
Yeah, I can see that when you had the comparison of the two. It's definitely more modern. It seems like it might, I don't know, just flow a little bit more smoothly.
Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you. Eric, could you just explain what the level 3 site plan is?
Yes, the level 3 is a requirement just specifically created for City Place and is how new buildings are reviewed going through the process. So every building that's gone in here has gone before the City Commission that was sitting at the time that the building went through to review it, and it follows site plan review, the site plan review standards. Is it compatible? Is it, how does the connectivity, how does it affect water, sewer? I mean, there's a number of things, other standards, and those will be put in the report that ultimately comes before the City Commission for the new Macy's building and was on the other buildings as well. So, it goes through Planning Board, then comes to the City Commission. So, and that is done as a resolution, and that is the site plan. You recently did it with the hotel, the Hilton Hotel, and then before that, the South Tower, the office tower, the convention center was done that way. Macy's when it originally came through. So all these went through that process, and it is a City Commission, and you get to that's the bite of the apple when it comes forward, and how is it compatible with what's surrounding? So
I think it also,
did that answer your question?
it reflects our thinking from 20 years ago, and now we're in a very different place in terms of City Place. Commissioner Ryan, then Commissioner
I just
Neal.
wanted to follow up on the, so it comes before the City Commission. So this, what we're going to be looking at is taking this Mediterranean requirement out, but leaving design guidelines, or did I understand you to say they're coming back with like a different, or part of their next step would be to bring design guidelines?
Well, what it is there are some design guidelines already in what's approved. Talks about, as the mayor said, coverings, shade coverings and so forth, has some things about how the windows and so forth look. But some of these provisions that they're specifically requesting is the requirement that it be Mediterranean. So that is what we spent a lot of time going one way or the other, want to know. But we are also going to be incorporating some of the downtown things where, so you don't have the flat blank wall, you have recesses, and as the building is lengthened, and you have the breaks as it goes, up the building and to the sides on the building, the planar breaks.
It has to be visually interesting.
Yeah. So those things are being incorporated in. We're trying to bring City Place more in line with what's going on in the downtown. I mean, there's more things than just the architecture that's coming forward.
Right.
This was mainly about the architecture, but there's a couple more tweaks that are going on. I will go over all of those when the process comes forward. We're pretty much on board with City Place on the majority of those. However, we definitely wanted to know what you guys thought about the architecture, because if we move forward saying, let's remove Mediterranean architecture, and y'all didn't want that, we would have spent a lot of time having to go back. Or if we said, sure, let's take it out, and you guys definitely wanted to leave it in, we didn't want to run into that. So that's why we're here, to find out how you guys feel about the Mediterranean or not Mediterranean. And
Commissioner Newman had a question.
Thank you, Mayor. I think to your point, Mayor, everything is seasonal, and whether it's 2 years or 20 years, I think the season for City Place, it served its purpose. And if we were talking, obviously, about original architecture, it'd be a totally different conversation. We wouldn't be having this conversation. Yeah. But I think given the fact that season, almost a 20-year season, I would be supportive of moving in this direction. And I have to believe that, market analysis and all sorts of extensive looks into how this brings in businesses, how this creates the next 20 years, the next 2 decades of City Place has been done. And so I would be very supportive of opening it up and not, kind of just laser-like in terms of a Mediterranean architecture.
Yep, I agree. What does the planning department think?
It's really, I don't want to say immaterial to us. I mean, we've been going forward. Is
it immaterial to you, Rick?
It presents challenges to regulate. I mean, in some regards, it makes it easier. In some regards, it makes it difficult. Those of you that remember the office tower that came in, that is a hybrid of Mediterranean and not Mediterranean. That glass
reminds
wall
me of the hotel, actually. It looks a lot like the hotel.
The hotel got a lot, you wouldn't be able to call that Mediterranean, but it has a lot of the elements where it has a lot of solidity, even though it's got some glazing. So those things are still going to be embedded in the regulations. One of the things with the office tower, as you come east on Okeechobee, you're heading east, you're seeing, I didn't put a picture in, and I apologize for that, but you see more of the punched windows and the heavier solid block wall. But if you're coming westbound from the island, you would notice that the corner there has a lot of glazing on it. Well, and then the back corner of the tower.
So you're talking about the existing?
The existing office tower.
I'm sorry, I thought you meant.
So you have the tower, which is glass, but it's a tower element. So it has that Mediterranean tower element, but it's a glass tower element. So going through that process, and Elkis Manfredi weighed in on it. So, I mean, who were the original ones that did the architectural designs? But that one was a very difficult one to get to where we were. So while I say it's easy in some regards to say it's got to be Mediterranean, but then what is Mediterranean and how does that apply? Yeah. So from the standpoint of not having the Mediterranean and having some other ones, yes, there are regards where it will be easier for staff to look at a project and say, okay, here we're just, every so often you have a column or a break, it doesn't have to be an arch in there as well. So from the standpoint of regulations, sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's not. It's one of those things where we have the regulations in place. And
yeah, I'll add to that, Mayor, is that I think we're okay departing from the Spanish Mediterranean style. I think to Eric's point, what you'll see with the design regulations, I think our bigger concern is more scale and form and how the building engages the street, particularly with the Macy's building, sure, where you've got the storefronts along Rosemary, and then how that building is treated as it goes up. So
I think personally, I think it's a welcome change. I think, Commissioner James?
Thank you. I would welcome it as well. I think this could be pretty exciting. It opens up a lot of architectural possibilities, and having observed some of Related's other projects, I think to kind of take the shackles off could be some pretty exciting, present some pretty exciting opportunities.
Okay, bring us something back.
Okay, thank you.
Now we're going to talk about docks.
Yes, and this is a very simple discussion, but
So you say.
docks are regulated in our zoning code in section 94-313. And in that language, it says that with regard to the number of docks that are permitted for a homeowner, it's limited to 1 dock permitted per lot. So using this as an example, on North Flagler Drive, you see that you have 2 lots that are divided. You have a lot on the block on the north and a dock on the lot to the south. So the question was raised, what would happen if a property owner that owns one of these 2 docks or lots decided to compile and connect, if you will, the 2 lots into one if they were unified? Well, by the strict letter of the intent of our zoning code, they would have to demolish one of the homes on one of the docks in order to meet the existing code requirement of 1 dock per lot. So staff did not have an issue if, in fact, they wanted to consolidate 2 lots into one and keep the 2 docks. But again, before we went too far down the road, we wanted to run this hypothetical scenario by the commission to see if they were okay with it, because either way, we'd have to initiate a code change. So we're basically looking at 2 options. Under option A, the 1 dock would have to be eliminated. So that's what you see actually under option B. They would have to remove one of the 2 docks. Under option A, if they unified the 2 lots, they could keep both docks. So we're just seeking direction on that issue.
Commissioner Neering?
Thank you, Mayor. So definitely supportive of option A, but that's the maximum, right? The 2?
Correct.
Okay.
We could write it in such a fashion that it'd be no more than 2 if lots
And
were.
it can't be commercial, right?
No,
Right.
could not.
Okay.
Could not.
Thanks.
Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you. I'm not worried about any of it because at the end of the day, anything else that might come out there is going to have to be permitted by DEP and Corps, and they're not letting stuff in there. So, I mean, it makes sense with this size of property to allow them the flexibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Anybody
wanted to
else?
make sure. Thank you.
Everybody okay with that? 2 docks it is.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going now on to item number 3, economic development study. Chris?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Chris Rug, Director of Economic Development for the City of West Palm Beach. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce Tony DeLisi of Avalanche Consulting, who actually performed this study. But I did just want to make a few comments just to give a little bit of background and reference for the study. So I've been anticipating this day for about the last 12 months because we've been working soup to nuts about that long on compiling this study. And stating the obvious, the city has seen some really tremendous assets added to the city. And even though we are part of a national economy, it's important to note that the local policies and our efforts do play a role in that success. The mayor and the commission's will to encourage policies that promote job growth and investment in the city have been effective. And I think you'll see that in the study. And this has been matched with staff across the board being helpful as well. I can reference a story with every single department where they've helped me or brought me a project, or in some way or form or another have played a role in economic development while also meeting their own specific goals. So economic development is definitely a team sport, and I can't say that enough, really, of everybody that's been helpful. So the city and the CRA did most of the lion's share of financial support and leadership on this project. But, and I would like to thank John Ward and the CRA for their help with this project. However, outside of the city walls, the city really does have a great economic development team as well. That includes the Chamber of Commerce of the Palm Beaches. Dennis, thanks for being here. Rafael Clemente in the back in the Downtown Development Authority. Business Development Board of Palm Beach County and the Economic Development, or the Economic Council of Palm Beach County as well. These organizations bring ideas and policies and incentives and play a really critical role that is crucial to the city's success. On an individual level, we did have some help with the advisory board that helped guide this study. Dennis Grady was on it, Kelly Smallridge, Michelle Jacobs, Tanika James from the DDA, Rafael Clemente, Michael DeBach, who was with the Economic Council. He has since gone back to Florida Power and Light, and Gary Hines, all helped on this advisory board. So, lastly, this study will be the starting point of updating the city's economic development plan, and we will have real data to help guide and update that plan, and hopefully continue the success of the city over the next 3 to 5 years. So with that, I hope you really like the information. There's a lot into it, so I know Tony will try to cover most of the highlights, but thanks so much for hearing this presentation. Tony?
Thank you, Chris. Good job putting this all together. And Tony, we're really glad you made it in. I was telling him that when I saw the thunder and lightning this morning, I'm like, oh my God, he's not going to get here.
No, hi, and I'm Tony DeLisi with Avalanche Consulting, and I'm glad to be here as well. I wasn't aware that there was a major storm happening in Florida until this morning when I was flying out here, so I'm glad it all worked out. And it's Mayor, Commissioners, it's nice to see you all and everybody else. Just want to, I know we've met and talked about this before, but a quick background for anybody watching, available and otherwise. I'm the Vice President of Avalanche Consulting, and we're based in Austin, Texas, but we are a national economic and workforce development consulting firm. We do work for cities big and small all around the country, and just really see this as a very individualized process. We like to come in and get to know communities and help them be the best that they can be in terms of their economy and just overall community. This project that we are completing and going to be helping, I think, with some additional assistance moving forward, but this economic development study was set out to provide a comprehensive look at the West Palm Beach economy and your competitive position, and particularly analyzing a number of sectors. I, like Chris, wanted to acknowledge the partners that came together to do this. I know the city was really the lead on this, but the Chamber of Commerce of the Palm Beaches, Palm Beach County Business Development Board, West Palm Beach DDA, the CRA, and the Economic Council of Palm Beach County were all really influential in informing our advisory group, giving us good feedback, helping point us to issues and areas that we need to address. And I also want to thank the over 70 different individuals and businesses that participated in interviews and focus groups and helped us get a really well-rounded view of what's happening here in the community. So that well-rounded view, I like to always emphasize that Avalanche really looks at economic development in a holistic way. You can't just jump in and say, do we have sites? Do we have incentives? There's much more to it today. Talent is cited as the #1 concern of businesses. Well, they have the people, the right skills that they need. When you start talking about talent, you're talking about housing, you're talking about equity, you're talking about transportation. There's so many factors that go in, and you really can't just jump into a community looking at just one area. We really want to come in and give you a well-rounded look at what's happening in your community, why it matters, and how that might inform your strategic development efforts going forward. So through this process, we began with kickoff and really digging into all the different reports and studies that have been done in the past, both on West Palm, Palm Beach County, the Miami Metro. We don't want to be duplicating efforts. We really want to be building on that past success. And then we really jumped into the data assessment and our focus groups, our interviews. I think we spoke with each of you individually, myself or Noel Salerno, my colleague, who's not here today, but also meeting with local businesses, getting tours, getting a sense of what's going on here, qualifying that with all of our data analysis that I'll highlight today. And then really digging into those sector profiles, trying to understand different industries and sectors here in the economy, different geographic areas, seeing how that connects to some of those broader regional planning efforts and resources, and helping identify possible gaps or other areas that you could focus on further. Included in that was a innovation district evaluation. And all throughout, we've been chatting with y'all and with other folks to really get an understanding and make sure that we're not just doing this as a data from the outside, but grounding this in reality here in the community. Quick review, when we were doing that data assessment in the report, we picked 5 community benchmarks along with our local benchmarks. So we looked at how West Palm is performing relative to Boulder, Colorado, Cary, North Carolina, Santa Monica, California, Sandy Springs, Georgia, and St. Petersburg, Florida, and also tracking your performance relative to the county, the broader 3-county Miami Metro, the state of Florida, and the US. And just to reiterate, those sectors that we dug into in the second half of the project were really understanding what's happening in finance, corporate headquarters, the medical sector, marine, tourism, nighttime economy, the Antique Road geographic area, Northwood Village and the historic North End, and looking at this concept of an innovation district and the geographic area that could entail that and what all that means. There's a lot in here. I'm going to try to go through it. I know we've had these discussions, and there's a much more detailed report that goes along with it, but I really wanted to touch on the big takeaways that we saw. And I see a formatting error in here. Whoops. I thought I fixed that. The really big things you see here are you guys are growing jobs incredibly rapidly. 21% job growth the last 5 years. That's over double the US rate. That's faster than Florida. That's a lot of jobs being created. Population growth, you see 7%. It's not quite as high, but that's faster. That's also almost double the US rate. It's really fast. And that job growth has been catching up coming out of a really poor economy with the recession. So this rapid growth brings with it challenges, but that's also a really positive sign. You don't see that in a lot of areas. Another interesting side of that to see is that you're really tied into a regional economy and a regional labor shed. 75% of jobs here are filled by non-residents, and similarly, a lot of residents are leaving the city to fill jobs. And that's an important dynamic that you have here because you're pulling from resources and a large labor shed that when you're looking at just the existing commute patterns, the city pulls from a working population of 680,000 individuals in the broader region. And when you add on the bright line, which isn't even in those statistics, that number could multiply even further. And it gives you this wide base that employers can look. When you say they're looking for talent, you have nearly 1 million individuals that they could potentially hire in the broader labor shed, and that's really telling for a community of your size. You also benefit from a number of world-class educational institutions, both higher ed as well as a grade A for the Palm Beach County school districts. That education piece is incredibly important as we see these jobs going forward requiring higher skill sets, requiring a little bit more than a high school degree, whether it's a certificate, an associate, bachelor's, or onward. You have all of those options in the region and are producing I think it was, 19,000 graduates in a 25-mile radius of the city just in 1 year alone. So the talent base here is very strong, and the existing education of the populace here is very high as well. As part of that, in addition to looking at the demographics and the economics, we were looking at the tourism industry and real estate analysis, and something that really stood out was the potential for more hotels here. Visitor stays have been growing, spending has been growing, but you have a very high share of the visitors of Palm Beach County, but not as high a share of the overnight stays. And also when you look at hotel employment and a number of other factors, you can really see that you could accommodate more hotels and more of those overnight stays, keeping those visitors here, spending their money in the city.
And when you look at the occupancy rate, I mean, during season, you can't get a room.
Yeah. Exactly. And the seasonality is dimming. It's still there for sure, but there's dimming. Over the years you're seeing more and more regular and year-round visitors to the community, and you have so many assets that people are coming to. I mean, really, that's why top of the visitors' destinations. There's a wide range of things that people are looking for here, and I think we've seen in the report that there's more that could bring people here, as well as serve as amenities for the local community. When we dig in the office side as well, looking at real estate, we really see that high need for office space, particularly Class A office. Vacancy rates keep falling, and the rent rates keep going up. You're seeing rents that are higher than in parts of Miami today. And with that growth, that's incredible, but at a certain point, if there's nowhere for businesses to go, they won't come, and they'll go to other destinations where they can find that space.
That office rent space at $60 or $61, that's higher than many areas in the region, right?
Yes, yeah. It's very high. And that is for Class A. There are other class of office available, but those are filled up as well. There's very little vacancy. And something to note, this is mostly a story of positive growth. There's a lot of really amazing stuff going on, but I think it's important, as well as this goes into a strategic planning process, to note where there's challenges as well. And the main one that continues to resonate with us is that there are above average poverty levels in the city of West Palm Beach, and they're generally very focused in certain neighborhoods, particularly the historic North End and other areas. And we see economic development as a great opportunity to look at issues of equity, barriers to inclusion, and how do we help bring people out of poverty and give them the tools to fulfill their economic opportunities and so forth. So noting that and seeing where there's places to grow and continue to evolve as we see all this economic growth happening here in the community. So I'm just going to run through some of these quickly. Please stop me if you have questions. I see another formatting error. Just to highlight again, job growth, employment growth, both very high. You're seeing, more than double the U.S. job growth, nearly double in population growth. You're outpacing some of these really high-performing areas in terms of creating jobs. Sandy Springs, Georgia, right in the middle of Atlanta, one of the boomingest cities in America, growing faster than that area, growing faster than the Miami metro. Population growth, maybe slower in some of those benchmarks, but still outpacing the U.S., outpacing the metropolitan area. When we look at that labor shed, I think it's great to see that map. You really see all those zip codes all in the area that you're pulling from now. Those are currently where people are commuting today to work here in the city. So as you create jobs, you're able to pull from all these great communities, these people that want to work here. And I think it's important to note.
Excuse me a minute, Tony. Commissioner James, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you talk about how you came up with the comparison cities? You had 5, I think. And I was just curious what the factors were that.
So that was in discussion with the advisory group and with Chris. And the factors that we were considering were your location within a major metropolitan area, I think, is important. You're an independent city here and an independent county, but you're adjacent to Miami, which is one of the largest cities in the U.S. And how does that function? You don't want to be you're not a suburban community, but you're a part of that metropolitan area. So we wanted to find a similarly balanced cities that were within major metros, but their own independent cities. Looking as well at the size of the community, each of these are in a similar population size. They have different dynamics in terms of the number of jobs they have and some of those commuting patterns, but those are helpful to see and understand. Those are the main dynamics, really. Similar size, similar geographic location, and trying to get some feel for similar jobs in some ways. Looking at Santa Monica, where they have a waterfront, they have a lot of technology, they have some finance, but getting those balances, I think, from each of those, and some variety within it. So I think it's really important to note that there's a misconception often, I think, that Florida is mostly retirees, and you guys have a very young and you're growing more young as a population here in the community. The left-hand chart is showing that those people that are participating in the labor force, either looking for jobs or having a job currently, that are under 65 years old. And you grew that population here in West Palm by 7% over 5-year period. The U.S. only saw a 2% growth rate. That's incredible. You go to a lot of communities across the country that are aging more rapidly, and they're seeing almost no growth in their active younger labor force, and you're seeing very rapid growth there. Similarly, nearly 30% of your population is what we call young professionals, 25 to 44 years old. That's higher than the U.S., that's higher than Miami Metro, it's higher than almost all of these benchmarks. So it's important to really see that when businesses are looking for some place where they know they can grow and thrive in the future, West Palm is one of those locations that is growing that young labor force, that is growing individuals with educations that are available and excited to be working.
Commissioner James?
you had, I don't know if that was a default, what it said, value. Can you give us the actual, for instance, Sandy Springs, Georgia?
Yeah,
And Miami Metro on the other chart?
I think this was a Mac to PC issue that I'm going to double check after this. But the actual value, so Miami Metro, I think, was 27%.
Okay.
And Sandy Springs, looking at 12% or so.
All right, thank you.
I apologize, that did not transfer. And similarly, education levels. You might see on the left, bachelor's degrees are what we're seeing. You got 32% of the residents here have a bachelor's degree or higher. It looks low relative to some of these benchmarks, but that's incredibly high. That's above the US, that's above the metro. The reason some of these benchmarks are a little bit astronomical are that they have major research universities located there. They're not the norm, but I think that's it's a good test to see that you're performing incredibly well, even compared to some of these very robust, research-oriented, highly educated communities. And on the right, 10% of the residents of West Palm have an associate degree. And that is very telling, because associate degrees, certificates, that's the side of the economy that we see incredibly high demand from businesses. They're looking for those people that have technical skill sets, that are ready to work, that are looking at practical degrees. A similar side I didn't touch on in the quick takeaways, but the entrepreneurial community here is very strong. You have 14% of self-employed individuals here in the community. That's very high. When you similarly, this kind of goes to that university research side, when you look at patents, the number of inventors, people living here who have their name on a patent application, you have 6.6 per 10,000 residents. That's above the US. That's above all the benchmarks except for the major research universities, which makes sense. But for a community of your size without a really large research-focused university, to have that number of inventive people living here, creative, entrepreneurial people, you see that in the self-employed side, that's a tremendous asset and something to really focus on, I think.
And I think the other thing, I recently saw an article that said we were a good place for women entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that was in some of our stats as well. You have a high share of woman-owned businesses, of minority-owned businesses. This is a place that has opportunities and the resources, and I think with continued strategic development and efforts can do more to continue to enhance that community. Another side, though, that we see is the household incomes here in West Palm Beach are relatively low. And this ties back to the poverty levels. I think we see a lot of folks that are working here that don't necessarily live here. And similarly, folks that are living here with jobs, perhaps not working in some of those higher paying industries. Your salaries are high, but incomes are low. And I think that's a mismatch between population and jobs. And there can be more done to connect the folks living here to those jobs and vice versa. And to that end, I think that's where you see 17% poverty rate in 2016 citywide. But when you look at the geographic breakdown by census tract, those high poverty concentrated areas, particularly in the north side and the south, it's not quite south, the western corner of the city, when you have many tracts that have almost no poverty. So understanding where that's located, understanding what those barriers are to economic inclusion and so forth is an important part of the strategic planning process.
Can you go back?
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out where this dark strip is, the horizontal one. I thought it was Westgate too, which really isn't us, but these are by zip codes? Or
yeah, this is census tract here.
Census tract,
So not as high population there, so that's part of it too. When you have, it stands out more when it's not as largely populated areas.
So there are some areas in here that technically are not in the city. Yeah.
I think so. It's always so challenging, the city boundaries and the zip codes and the census tracts. We did our best with everything through this, and you'll see in the report the caveats that explain where the data demarks and everything. It's always a challenge. We can get citywide statistics, but anytime you go lower than that, you have to work with what the census has given us. But And on a similar note, there's discussion about crime levels, but crime rates have been falling in the community over the last decade. It continues to be a concern, though, that is brought up. And there's obviously a direct linkage to crime and poverty, and we see this nationwide. And further breakdowns when you look at when and where crime is occurring in West Palm tends to be located in areas with higher poverty, in areas over weekends, particular time frames. And so it's something to be aware of, and I know that there's great work being done to address it. We always say when we're facing these challenges, knowing them and acknowledging them and looking at the programs that we're putting forward to address them is the best strategy that you can have rather than shying away from those issues. So quickly, again, I know don't have a ton of time. Big highlights of what makes this a competitive place to do business is the tax rate here in Florida. And in West Palm in particular, with the financial industry and others, the no personal income tax and low corporate income tax rates have already seen tremendous boons with the new national federal tax bill that makes it more burdensome in states with higher personal and corporate income tax rates. And that makes Florida and West Palm a very attractive destination for certain types of businesses. Business activity has been growing here. There was stalling of sales tax growth through the recession, but since 2013, you've seen rapid growth in sales tax collections here in the city. And you also have very affordable utilities. FPL offers some of the most affordable electricity.
Rates, yeah.
Here
among the lowest rates in the country, really.
Yeah, it's really tremendous. And so, although generally we're not looking at major manufacturing power producers, this is still attractive for areas like data centers and many others that we know that this region has been doing well with. You also have great internet service. This is just showing the gigabit access. You have almost 100% coverage for regular broadband, but that gigabit service is really attractive to tech companies, to data centers, and other heavy internet users. Seeing 8% access nationwide, and this is 2014. You have 37% today. That's only increased since then. Again, touching on the visitors trends, we're just seeing continued growth in the number of visitors and their spending here in the community. But to touch on the bit about demand for hotels, you see 51% visited West Palm when they come to Palm Beach County. Boca Raton was the close second at 44%. When you look at overnight stays, West Palm came in at 19% to Boca Raton's 34%. And this is not any criticism of Boca Raton. We all want to play and have visitors come to them. But it's a stark gap between those visitors and those overnight stays. And I think it shows a really high demand for more hotel space or hotel rooms here in the community. And similarly, highlighting that need for office space, when you look around all of Palm Beach County, there's very little Class A office space. Most of those communities that are blank, that's because they have zero Class A available today. West Palm has dropped down, at least it's probably dropped even further now, but in Q1 of this year was 6.6% vacancy rate for Class A office space. Countywide, it was 9.2%, and the rates here in downtown West Palm Beach were the highest at $60 per square foot, and those have continued to go up just as the vacancy rates have gone down. It's your basic supply and demand curve. As those vacancy rates continue to fall, the cost will only go up, and that will likely and continue to deter certain investment. We've actually heard that firsthand from a number of folks in the community that have had businesses looking for that space and haven't been able to find it. And for now, you could shrug your shoulders, say tough luck. But if you want to continue to grow and keep that diverse industry base, this is an important side of that equation. So any last questions? I know there was a lot more in the report, some highlights there, just related to the data before I jump into the sectors real quick.
Any other questions? Jump away.
All right. So looking back at those sectors that I listed at the beginning, I think we see a lot of great opportunity around all of them. Finance and corporate headquarters, you're seeing rapid local job growth. These pay great salaries. These are the types of jobs that really bring a lot of income here into the community. You're growing finance more quickly than the whole region, which is already growing very quickly. You've got assets that include the financial district, the airport, which is very attractive to the executives in these types of businesses, your higher education institutions, the tax environment, lifestyle amenities. All the little pieces to the recipe are here. There's that need for Class A office space, though, to accommodate that continued growth, or you won't see those numbers keeping up as they are. The big opportunities that we really see here are that competitive tax environment combined with the livability. People are looking for places where their employees want to live, that have an attractive lifestyle, and the housing, transportation, and other amenities that make that work. And Brightline, new apartment complexes, all of those things are driving that livability. Your high walkability scores in the downtown also contribute to that. Cybersecurity and data is another area. We're seeing a lot of growth around the country. You hear a lot about blockchain and these things, and it's hard to understand really what they mean, that means, but it is about better securing our information and figuring out ways to make these transactions more seamless, how to store and manage that data. Your electrical rates make it very attractive. The talent pool also helps. Connectivity to the South American and Central American business markets also help with a lot of this, and you're seeing that growth in the region. And the other area we really liked a lot was looking at venture capital and investors. There's a lot of wealth and a lot of finance happening here in the community. There's not as much investment and venture activity with your local businesses. So looking at those entrepreneurs, looking at all those brilliant young people and others coming up with ideas, start businesses, seeing how we can better connect them to the local financial community, to local wealth, and keep spurring that organic growth here of business.
Yep. Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you. As you talk about those types of people, who are they? What do they look like? Age group and economic
entrepreneurs
levels?
or
the venture capital investors, you know, and then in these sector opportunities. So I assume that these are people we want to attract.
I think the venture capital, it's more the wealth is here. I think it's getting the wealth interested in putting that money into the community here. So it's less attracting them and more building that connectivity. We always talk about economic developers as the conveners in chief. You know, they know the players, they're talking to the small businesses, they're talking to the entrepreneurs, the tech community. They're also aware of the wealthier folks in the community, the financiers and so forth. And how do we create some of that activity that bridges those gaps and lets them know there's good investment opportunities here? What do those look like? How do we begin to build that together? And that's the kind of thing that come out of the strategic planning process, but really it's less about attracting them in and more connecting them. I think there's the wealth is here, the businesses are here. It's like, how do we play matchmaker and get them talking?
Thank you.
Any other questions? The other sector, and it's another one that's already booming here, is the medical sector. You've got the Cleveland Clinic, New York Lagone, JFK North, Good Samaritan, St. Mary's. They're building the new hospital for special surgery. Really, medical is growing rapidly here, and that's a combination of the population growth. Generally, healthcare is going to serve the people that live here, but you're already a destination. You've got a lot of folks that spend their time up in the Northeast and also here that are servicing clinics that have moved here specifically for those patients, but also that are conducting studies, that are doing new testing. And you've also got scientific research in diverse healthcare fields that's happening at FAU, at Nova Southeastern, also with Scripps Research Institute, Max Planck. And Southeast Florida is kind of this amazing hub of new technology development, but also the treatment of patients. And I think we've had discussions with a number of the hospitals here, and there's a really great opportunity here to build out that destination medical. We've been in other communities where folks would like to see that happen, and it doesn't really make sense, but with your airport, with the growth in the community, with the connectivity that you have to the rest of the US as well as to other countries, there's a really great opportunity here, we think, around that, and we describe it more in the report. And again, with the strategic development, it's thinking about the different elements that need to come into play in terms of redevelopment and hotels and building the hospitals, working with each other and working with the city. But there's all the key ingredients are in place for that as well. But medical technology is similar, and that's looking at device development, therapies, and these other areas that are happening all throughout Palm Beach County and happening in the city today. But similar to the entrepreneurial side, how do we continue to support that, give them the right, whether it's wet lab space or office space, or the things that they need to ensure that the city has the right real estate, the right financing, the right other business support to encourage and keep that kind of technology being developed here. The other one is the marine sector, and it's important to know with the marine sector, this isn't a major employment cluster in terms of number of jobs. Medical is creating thousands of jobs. It's a great opportunity, many levels of education that people can plug in and get local degrees and get involved with. Finance is similar, growing very fast. Marine is much smaller and much more concentrated, but it has a significant economic impact in the community. The Palm Beach International Boat Show continues to grow, created $84.2 million of impact in Palm Beach County alone in 2018. So even further when you look at it statewide. And you have a unique concentration of leaders with Repurposing. You have Lockheed Martin developing submersibles for the military and private use as well. And when you really look at those marina sales, they continue to grow over the last 5 years and before. And that's generating income for the city to make investments in other areas. Similarly, the values of working waterfront properties have nearly doubled over the last 5 years. Again, bringing more income into the city, creating more opportunity to reinvest. And when we're looking at those opportunities, we really think that recreational marine activity is one that's particularly absent in the city today, and that could be people renting a kayak and getting out into the water, as well as shops and others just along those storefronts. But how do we get more people into and involved with the water on marine areas here in the city to generate economic activity, to bring an amenity to the community, and to draw in visitors? It has a threefold impact there. Continuing to support and look at the luxury yacht expansions, whether that's at Repurposing or with the boat show. Those are bringing in tremendous amount of dollars to the community. They're also bringing a lot of eyes and visibility to the great opportunities that are here in other industries, bringing business people and so forth here as visitors. And aerospace defense might seem weird under marine sector, but trust me, it makes sense. When you have folks like Lockheed Martin, they're also an aerospace company, and there's a number of aerospace jobs county-wide. But that's really they share similar needs in terms of sites, in terms of workforce, in terms of the types of communities that they're looking for when they're doing the research and development of drones and other technology. In particular, I know Lockheed Martin, this isn't national secrets, but others are looking at drone submersible technologies. Everybody always thinks about aerospace drones, but there's a whole new industry that's being branched out to look at how do we explore the oceans and develop these things. So really understanding what those needs are and ensuring that West Palm is welcoming and aware of and developing those industries going forward. We also looked at tourism in depth at a lot of different data county-wide and within the city. Continues to grow. Mentioned before the strong demand for hotels that we really see here. And when we talk about opportunities, it's a couple of these we've heard. Hotels, there's strength and a need there for more hotels that could be accommodated. Recreational marine activity was already mentioned, but it would be a big draw. I think we heard from a number of folks that we talked to that said their biggest surprise coming to West Palm was that they couldn't just get into the water. And that might not happen downtown, but along Curry Park and other areas, there's a number of places that could see more of that. The conference center continues to grow and attract more and more activities and robustness, but it's almost at its limitation. And so the hotels tied to the conferences is how do we create the space to bring in more events, and tying those events particularly to these sectors that we're going after. How do we bring in some of the business leaders from across the world to see what West Palm has to offer through a conference, and hopefully in turn they're going to open up shop here and do business. Experiential vacations is something that folks talk about a lot, and it's really hard to understand what that trend means in terms of the new age of tourism. But it's when looking at millennials not necessarily wanting to do the same cookie cutter vacations, but really going in and getting to know a community. That includes cultural tourism, seeing those historical sites. The really authentic vacation is what we hear a lot about. I saw a great example of a program that I shared with our advisory group and others, but where they have volunteers in different cities around the world that will come out and be tour guides for visitors. Voluntary, there's no script, they're there to show people around because they love their community. And this is catching on across the world, and people really love it because that's what they want. They want that authentic experience, that getting to know a place.
And what a great idea. And, we have such history in some of our areas, and we've talked a lot about African American tourism and history related to that through our CRA, but that just looks like a really big opportunity to me.
Yeah, in particular in the historic North End,
Right.
we had some great discussions there. And I think you'll see this one again, but connectivity is another big part of it. I think you've got a lot of great neighborhoods and a lot of great areas here in West Palm, and the downtown is very walkable and bikeable, but there still are conceptual challenges connecting some of those areas as well as practical in terms of transportation. The trolley is fantastic, but I think sometimes visitors might feel they're in downtown, they don't realize there's Antique Row right there. And in my mind, coming in from Texas where everything's all spread out, it's very close, but it still feels very divided. The recent mobility study really highlighted some of those challenges just related to the pedestrian walkways and how they feel and how they look. And so continuing to work on that connectivity between all the different parts of West Palm to bring residents together, but also visitors so they can get around and enjoy everything the city has to offer. Because tying into the tourism side is the nighttime economy. And y'all already offer a variety of arts, dining, there's entertainment, you have the Kravitz Center, Drama Works, City Place, Clematis Street is a unique cultural opportunity, the restaurants, the nightlife. And that continues to grow.
I would say cultural.
Cultural.
Clematis Street, cultural.
Compared to communities that have been built brand new in the suburbs, they don't have that authentic feel that, again, I was speaking to. There are challenges. Crime remains a concern. I think, it's on people's minds, and continued efforts around public safety to address that will help. But all of these areas are booming. You see sales up at all the restaurants around town when just restaurant sales are up. Nightclubs are down, which I think was a positive story that folks wanted to hear. But the active nightlife is happening. People are coming out, and continuing to support that with public safety and creating those interesting events that bring people out, those things that make it more fun for folks. Live music is one of those areas. I live in live music capital of the world, and I know that people love walking down the street and there's somebody performing at this bar, or there's actually a larger venue, and there's many things going on. You can always kind of find something to see. And that ties in as well to the performing arts. I think you already have the centers, they're doing well, they're really state-of-the-art, just facilities, great management, great productions being put on. But continuing to look at things like the Bright Line and how we can tie in, bringing folks in from out of the community on the Bright Line to attend events at the Kravitz Center, at Drama Works, and making that safe, inviting community to attend all of those facilities. And something this last thing we noted was, in a lot of our conversations, was the desire for more of that high-end dining. And that ties in very well as well to the business community. When we're talking about these sectors, talking about financial and how do we grow this and promote it in the community, we heard from executives and folks said, we don't have that many options to take out our business clients when they're here for dinner. And there are some, and they're great, but how do we continue to get a more diverse range of dining options for families that live here, for business travelers, for everybody in the community? and we get into our geographic areas a little bit more. We looked at Antique Row, and we had a tremendous meeting with many of the store owners and got a feel for what's happening on Antique Row, as well as looking at the zip code that surrounds it. And it really is a world-renowned destination. People are coming in from around the world to look for antiques here. But I think there's opportunities to continue to grow and enhance what that is as a destination for shopping. There's actually a lot of employment in other design areas currently in the zip code, the whole area surrounding Antique Row, whether that's furniture, manufacturing, and repair. There's home design. And how do we broaden the brand to make it more about home and design and not just antiques? The businesses are there, but bringing it all together for both marketing purposes and to help support them with small business resources. And so that's one opportunity. The other areas that we really see are helping with pedestrian friendliness, streetscaping, making it a little more shade tolerant so that it's not as much a park in the bright sun and go into one shop and leave, but make it more friendly and inviting for folks to stay, to keep spending, to go from one shop to another, and enjoy everything it has to offer, including a lot of restaurant growth that's been happening. Again, the connectivity, it's just south of downtown, but it feels like miles and miles away at times. So how do we make it easier and more inviting for folks to bridge that gap between downtown and Antique Row? And lastly is helping support businesses as they go more online. Online retail continues to grow. I don't think Antique Row is going to go away. It's a unique type of retail that it really is centered on its location here in West Palm. But helping them sell more online, increase their online presence so that people think of this as that destination and a place that they can boost their sales as shop owners. And lastly, looking at Northwood Village and the historic North End. And it's so interesting to me that Northwood Village and the whole area is a very creative and eclectic mix of different types of businesses, different arts, different shopping, different dining. It's kind of hard to put a finger on exactly what's happening in the North End of West Palm. But there has been growth in almost all areas in terms of sales. Restaurants are doing well. But that lack of just simplicity and identity, I think, is something we see an opportunity to better market and brand and bring together Northwood Village as that diverse part of the community, both ethnically, but also business-wise. There's many different things happening, but better marketing and branding and bringing that together in one kind of clearer identity would help bring folks in. It would help the businesses better market themselves and attract other types of businesses that want to be a part of that identity. And to the mayor's point about cultural tourism and the African American heritage in the city, celebrating the diversity that's there, that's diversity of race, that's diversity of business, and showcasing that this is an eclectic, interesting part of town and a great place to be and spend your money. Continuing to connect it to downtown again, both sides, so you can go north, south, and it's not just visitors coming in and going to City Place, but showing them everything that the city has to offer. Looking at Curry Park, as you do think about recreational marine activity and how do we redevelop this and integrate it in the broader neighborhood. The opportunities around the Repurposing Marina Village, we were really impressed by Repovich's desire and strong dedication to going out into the community, making sure that they're doing everything they can to invest and lift up the folks that are living there instead of displacing them. Continuing to do that and tie that into the whole historic North End. And that goes to when destination medical, when you're thinking about how do we develop this, that has to be in partnership with the neighborhoods that surround the hospitals, and how do we redevelop, make things safer, make things easier to get to, make the infrastructure stronger. And again, looking at the vacant parcels that are there, there's a number of them. They're growing in value. There's a lot of opportunity to develop it. So as we're thinking about things like destination medical, recreational marine activity, how do we create a plan that really brings in those parcels and uses them and doesn't just leave them as blighted appearing spaces in your community, but continuing to enhance and grow them?
One of the things that I've been talking about, and I hope that this commission will address in the future, is, as you have said it, I think most of us have read the book Happy City. He talks about the streetcar communities, those communities, those neighborhoods that are immediately adjacent to the downtown. and how we need to connect those and do these kinds of things with them.
Yeah. No, it's,
Market and brand them and make that connectivity and identity, but they should be our next line of attack, continuing to focus on downtown, but then thinking about those streetcar communities and how do we connect them.
that's exactly right. The last piece I just want to touch on was looking at the innovation district. And this was added on as its own section, not just a sector analysis, but initially thinking about the Jefferson Terminal District concept and whether that could work as an innovation district. And through the course of our dialogue and our study, we really decided to take a broader geographic view and looking at the Jefferson Terminal District, but as it relates to bigger assets within the city and within Palm Beach County. And that goes to, we really like the Brookings Institute definition of an innovation district, which says, geographic areas where leading edge anchor institutions and companies cluster and connect with startups, business incubators, and accelerators. They are also physically compact, transit accessible, and technically wired, and offer mixed use housing, office, and retail. So when we're looking at the Jefferson Terminal District, you have some of that, but not everything. And it's a pretty tight geographic area to have all of that, but it's immediately adjacent, again, like your Charlie communities, to downtown, to the airport, to the broader Palm Beach County business community. So we want to really think about how do we see this potential for an innovation district centered there, but tied into everything else. I think there's a lot of strong potential on the concept here in West Palm with your high share of self-employed folks, the patent inventors that live here, the business resources, your proximity to universities and private institutions that are conducting research and developing new products. And the warehouse district has that new community gathering space, spurring a lot of business activity, a lot of interest. We think the proposed overlay zoning will allow some of that flexibility to allow both residential and industrial and office uses and provide that social interaction that's really at the heart of the innovation district. Again, the city has that city-owned property within the district that with purposeful investment, thinking about how you can leverage and use that resource to further these ends. It's an important thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about those decisions.
It's interesting because a few weeks ago, Chris and I met with a finance guy who said that there are investors looking to invest in innovation districts particularly, which I found interesting and probably something we need to build on.
Yeah. You're seeing a lot of buzz around this, and this is why I think it's good to do a practical look at what's here. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot there. Continue to think about that planning and usage. Think about transportation and access, which can be a challenge with a couple of bottlenecks in there. But the elements that are being put in play right now do have a lot of great potential for that. So that's the highlights of the lot. Awesome. There's a lot in there. Mm-hmm. It really has been a pleasure working with the city and with all your partners. And I believe we're going to continue to assist as Chris and your team continues to write that strategic plan. We're going to act as advisors and sort of guides, and I think help you guys set some visioning and goals around this. And we're really excited because this is what we love to do. So thank you very
Tony.
much.
Excellent. When Chris was got the RFPs in and we were looking at those, and Chris was like, oh gosh, we've got some really established people and other people, and I said, well, Chris, what does your gut tell you? And so he said, my gut tells me to go with the Avalanche. And I said, well, then you need to do that. And a good thing your gut was right. Tony, good job. We're really impressed with what you did, so thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
Commissioner Neary.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. It is there's a lot to think about, but there is absolutely a blue ocean in terms of that presentation. So in terms of the time frame around, what I see is a major priority for the city is developing that economic strategic plan, or that. Where are we in that, Chris and Mr. Rue?
Well, so obviously I wanted to wait for the study to come out to be finalized first, and then I think the next step is to is to begin teasing out those ideas, thinking about how we move forward with the different area sectors. But right now, what I would like to do is tomorrow we have the lunch with the Chamber of Commerce where we'll share the information with the business community. And I think seeing that we are in the end of the fiscal year, that we let the information sit for the rest of the month of September, and then start on the planning process for the strategic plan beginning October 1st. That's my general plan. And with that, keeping with a lot of the folks that have helped us with the overall study. And I think, long story short, looking to have it done, I would say, in about 6 months, to have a draft of the updated economic development strategy plan ready.
Commissioner Wright?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Could we get a copy of this?
Absolutely. In fact, I was working today with Kathleen to get it up on the website.
Yeah, and I thought you had a copy of the report.
But so the one thing that I found really interesting is that 19% of the visitors, of the 51% of the visitors to West Palm Beach stay here. So that begs the question, where do the rest of them go?
Yeah.
And when you looked at that list of cities, they all have a deficit, right? They have more visitors than they have hotel rooms. So are we getting visitors from within the state? Are they, where are they staying?
The visitors partly too, I think there's repeats, because some people might go to multiple cities, but they're only going to stay in one. So the overnight stays adds up to 100, the visitors does not. So that might be part of the differential there, but it still gives a good indicator of where the traffic is going, where the traffic's staying.
Would that include people who might stay with relatives or something like that?
Yes, exactly.
And so that gives us a broader hotel type to look to in terms of development, as opposed to the larger ones for the convention center.
Yes, and the Visit Palm Beaches, their data has a lot of detail on those types of visitors, and much more than that is not my expertise, but they have a lot of information on that.
Yeah. Commissioner Neary?
Well, one other thing real quick, Commissioner, on the hotel spot is that I think Discover the Palm Beaches is also doing a deeper dive into the hotel analysis, where they're getting, I think, into the actual rooms and room numbers and where those visitors are staying, and actually talking to the specific hotels. So I think we're going to see a lot more data on that, much more than what was covered in our study.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to your point around the time frame, and obviously this isn't anything that we necessarily want to rush, but it's not lost on me that this dais is going to look different in 6+ months, and I would encourage us, as best we can to really cook and have a product ready to go. It's just my opinion on it in terms of timing.
You might take this month to talk to the commissioners and talk to the public, people who are interested in this, and sort of get their 1 or 2 or 3 things that stood out the most that they would like to see us pursue, and then sort of start putting that together.
Okay, great direction.
Commissioner Lambert?
That was actually going to be my question, was what is the plan for communicating this? I understand we have the chamber breakfast or the lunch tomorrow. I imagine that those 70 interviews really helped to get the word out about what we're doing as well, but I just was curious as to the follow-up to get.
And
the
we just did a
information out.
press release tonight that went out tonight on this. So
Right. One of the tactics that Avalanche is proposing is that community survey approach, as well as some additional stakeholder meetings to tease out those ideas and to kind of go back and say, okay, now that we know this, what are your thoughts and ideas? Because obviously, when you think about Antique Row, we think about the warehouse district and what we want to do with innovation and the various sectors that we identified. Those businesses that are in those areas, they know the area the best, and they know those businesses the best, and they're going to have a lot of great
The thing that
ideas.
stands out to me most is that whole issue of connectivity.
Right.
So we have these pockets of cool little places. How do we connect them for people?
Yep. And there's also some growing segments in here that I think will also be included that are so new. and I had another meeting with them today, but we are seeing robust growth in breweries and distilleries. We have 2 that are under construction right now. We're currently at 5 breweries that are open for business, and expecting an additional 7 over the next 12 months. And this is all brand new, and they're very bullish. They're getting organized, and that's something that was not included in this because it is so new. But that will be definitely part of the plan because they really see the city as a great place to do business, and I see them as a great way, to the mayor's point about being a connection, because they are in every sector or every area of the city, not just one location.
And they're interested in the experiential piece too, so that's cool. Yeah.
Just a follow-up question. I was just going to ask, when was the last time we did this type of study, and do we plan on doing them on a regular basis? Or a refresh? I mean, given your point about the breweries, that wasn't...
I know that this is, when we did the first economic development strategy plan in 2014, so I think the last time that we looked at data was, Raphael's telling me 2007, so that's probably the most recent.
2007?
That's what...
Yeah, but I thought we did it, Lambert was before that, wasn't it? After that, I mean.
With the Raphael Clemente Downtown Development Authority, with the last downtown master plan, there was an economic study done, more of a market analysis, not a sector analysis like this, but it did include some of this data, and it was done by the Lambert Advisory Group in preparation for our DMP work with Ziskovich.
Yeah. But I think we did something after that.
Rick Green's got a better memory than I do right now. The Alan Durham, who had my position before I took over as economic development, did do a lot of research and analysis for the city, and that's really what generated the initial economic development strategy plan. So if you think that was, what, Mayor,
2011, 12, probably 2012. So it was right after I got into office, so 2011, 2012.
Right. And the whole reason I initiated this was because the plan is right around 4 years old now, which I think there's been so many changes.
For sure.
I mean, it's a new city.
Other questions for Tony or Chris? Tony, thanks for the great work. Safe travels back to Austin.
Thank you.
Anytime you want to come back to West Palm, let us know.
No, one of my best friends who was in my wedding lives here now, so I'm...
okay, cool.
He moved here right before the project started, so it's perfect.
And where does he work?
He works for a spinal company that's up in Jupiter, but I think they're moving south, so it's on their way.
Is that... I can't think of their names.
There's a couple that are in the medical sector that are looking for space. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Commissioners.
Any other items for today? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.